I want to just kind of reiterate this story, just kind of relay some things to you. You all know, I think most of you know that I was born in India, and I moved here with my parents and when I was about 7 or 8 months old. And you know, for a family from India, and you know this just probably from many of the Indians or Asians that you know that education is highly valued. It's a really important part of life for us, and it's not just that you can get any degree. There's like certain ones that are approved and certain ones that are not approved. And so, in healthcare in India, it's doctors or engineers or professors or some type of professional degree in healthcare. Those are kind of the acceptable ones. And so, we also, there's approved sports, so to speak, that Indian kids can do. And cricket's one of them, and the other one's tennis. Like you don't do anything else. Those are the sports that you play, and TV and video games and all that kind of stuff is always plays like a secondary role to Indian kids, and I think as time's going by, we're getting more assimilated. I think as the world becomes more and more one place, I think we see less and less of this. But a good Indian kid is that's kind of what you do in your families, and so. In a moment of transparency, let me tell you that I have a kid right now. This is the state of my family. I have a kid that is taking a gap year. Yeah, we don't do gap years. That's not an Indian thing. Like, I have two kids that are playing football, not an Indian sport, and I have one kid that's a gamer. And I'm like, okay, I think my Indian card's going to be retracted here real soon. I'm going to lose that ability, but. My second kid, he plays football. He's a defensive end at Memorial, and a few weeks ago they had their game against Mater Dei. Mater Dei is the other Catholic school in town, and Memorial is the other one here. And Memorial's the one on the east side, and Mater Dei is on the west side. So it's kind of like this east versus west, Catholic school against Catholic school, and so it's a big game. Lots of tension and lead up to it. And so the game kicks off. I think it was a Friday, two Fridays ago, and so first half was uneventful. Really, I mean, I think the score was 7-7. Both had scored a touchdown, and so they come out out of halftime and going into the third quarter, and you could kind of see that Mater Dei was just kind of moving the ball methodically down the field, and so. They were just kind of steadily doing that. And so you knew, hey, they're going to eventually they're going to outscore Memorial, because Memorial was kind of like there, then they were not, they were on, they were off, whereas Mater Dei was just kind of steadily moving the ball. Well, it gets to the third quarter, and Mater Dei scores a touchdown. And the score goes to 14-7 Mater Dei, and it pretty much stays that way for the entire third quarter and the rest of the third quarter, and then even to the most part of the fourth quarter, it stays that way until the last 2 minutes. And then in the last 2 minutes, Mater Dei scores another touchdown, making it 21-7. Now, a little information about this class that my son's in. They've played together 7th, 8th, and 9th grade together, and they play as a team. And in those 3 years that they played, they never lost a game. And so they have had only wins. They don't even know what it feels like to lose as a team. And so now as they get to the 10th grade, they get kind of dispersed into JV and varsity teams. But as a team, they've never lost. And so I could see in this moment when the score goes to 21-7, you can just kind of see the spirits crushed. And I had watched a game last year when they played another team, and I won't mention who it is, but they beat that team. And at the end of the game, you could see the players on that side, the football players, they were ninth graders, they're crying. And I'm like, And I know that some of you guys are like, oh, that's good. They're in touch with their emotional side. That's not an Indian thing. We don't do that. We do not cry if you lose a football game. You can cry if someone dies, if something tragic happens, but not a football game. And so I can kind of just see the spirits, and I'm like, man, he better not cry. Like, it better not happen, right? And so I'm like coming up with this speech for him that I'm thinking through. I'm like, all right, what am I going to say to him? What should I tell him? And it was something like this. It was going to be like, hey, life doesn't always turn out the way that we plan. We don't always have it going exactly the way that we like it to go. There are many times that we have disappointments in life. But in those moments when you don't have everything going the way that you want it and everything kind of just seems like it's in a free spin or free fall, it's in those moments that you got to dig deep and you got to find out really who you trust in. And you got to find your hope in God. So I had this kind of great speech. And it's kind of interesting because as we're in chapter 29 and chapter 30 of 1 Samuel today, David's going to find himself in a similar, really more serious situation. Life is not turning out the way that he planned. It's not going the way that he wants it to go. And he's going to find himself in this moment stripped of everything that he kind of had going for himself in this moment, in this season. And he's going to have to figure out where's the source of his hope. Where's his joy coming from? What's he standing on? And we're gonna watch David as he digs deep in that moment of his life and he finds his strength and his hope in the Lord. And it's a good challenge for us as we look at David's life and what he does. Now, in this particular time, if you remember, David is still on the run from Saul. And because he's on the run from Saul, he's kind of living out his days in Philistine territory, away from his homeland, away from all of all the places and the people that he knew as his people. He's living out in the enemy territory with the king of Gath and the Philistines. And David had this pretty good relationship with the Philistine king. And so the Philistine king had given David this country town of Ziklag. And so he's out there living out there. And on the weekends, basically, David's going out and raiding doing these little war things with these enemies of Israel. But the Philistine king of Gath, King Achish, thinks that David is going and actually fighting Israel. He thinks that he's going and doing these small battles with southern Judah and attacking. And so he's like, man, David's my man. He's fully Philistine at this point. And so there comes this time in history when the Philistine army officially launches an attack on Israel. And this is King Saul and the Israeli army. And so it's in this moment that the king's like, oh, well, since David's already been attacking the Israelites, then this is a great opportunity. David can just join along with me. He's my bodyguard. I'm going to bring him along, and we will work together to really destroy our enemy, which is Israel. And so that's kind of the setup to where we are as we get into 1 Samuel chapter 29, verse 1. And this is what happens next. The entire Philistine army now mobilized at Aphek, and the Israelites camped at the spring in Jezreel. Aphek Spring at Jezreel, these two places, they're locations that we've been to before. Anybody remember where? Why? What? Now, it's okay. It's okay. You guys are like, no, it's okay. So some months ago, in the early part of the book of Samuel, Eli was the priest, and he had two sons, Hophni and Phinehas. And at that time, the Philistines were once again coming to fight the Israelites. And at that point, the Israelites came up with this idea like, oh, let's take our good luck charm, Ark of the Covenant, out onto the battlefield. And it was there at that battle that the Philistines captured it and took it back. And that's when Eli died and Hophni and Phinehas died. And so this location kind of has lots of history. For the Israelites, it's a place of embarrassment, a place of defeat, a place where they were wrecked. For the Philistines, it's the place where they had great victory. They're like, we slaughtered the Israelites here the last time. We're coming back to do it again. And so the Philistine rulers were leading out their troops in groups of hundreds and thousands, and David and his men marched at the rear with King Achish. David and King Achish had met actually earlier in chapter 21, if you remember, when David was on the run from Saul. And he tried to get away from the Israeli territory. He moved over to Gath. And when he gets there, people start recognizing David as to who he is. And they're like, oh, wait a second. Isn't this the guy that everybody sings about? Like he killed, Saul killed 1,000, but David's killed 10,000. Isn't this that same guy? Like, what's he doing here, right? Do you remember that? And do you remember what did David do? He did what? Do you remember? He acted crazy. He acted crazy. He started kind of like, remember it talks about how there was like dribble and food in his beard, and he just kind of like looking like a madman. And so King Achish is like, guys, we got enough crazy people here in our own town. Why are you going and bringing me foreigners who are crazy also? It's like, we don't need this. And so David kind of got out of that situation, and he moves back out of that territory, and again, still on the run from Saul. But time has passed, and now David has once again moved back, and for whatever reason, either Achish can't remember this is the same David, or maybe he thought, oh, the delirium's over, David's been healed. I don't know what happened, but the reality is they now have this pretty decent relationship, and Achish really thinks a lot of David. And so because Achish thinks that David's been marching out and destroying and attacking the southern Judah, he's like, man, we're going to war against the Israelites. I'm just going to call up David because he's my bodyguard. I know he's got my back, and he's already been attacking the Israelites, so this is a perfect opportunity. I'll just bring him on board. But the Philistine commanders demanded, what are these Hebrews doing here? And Achish told them, well, this is David, the servant of King Saul of Israel. He's been with me for years. I've never found a single fault in him from the day he arrived until today. So everybody's suiting up for battle, and the Philistine kings are looking around, and they're like, wait a second. Like, who let David in here, right? And again, the Israelites would have looked a little different. The Hebrews would have looked different in the way just they kept the hair and their beard on their face, and all of that would have looked different the way they dress. So he's like, man, what's going on here? Like, who let them in the camp? Right? But they shouldn't be back here behind the stage. They're like backstage. What if he's a spy? What if he's a secret agent? What if he's under deep cover and he's really going to turn on us in the middle of the battle? And Achish basically sticks up for David. He's like, no, guys, listen, David's a good guy. Trust me, he's a good guy. He's been with me for years. He's a great friend. He's a good, loyal subject. Don't worry about that. But the Philistine commanders were angry. Send him back to the town you've given him, they demanded. He can't go into battle with us. What if he turns against us in battle and becomes our adversary? Is there any better way for him to reconcile himself with his master than by handing our heads over to him? Isn't this the same David about whom the women of Israel sing in their dances? Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000. So the other four kings, they're like, man, Achish, you're Coco Loco. This is not going to work. We don't believe your story. No. David cannot be with us. No, he's got to go home. And so Achish summoned David finally, and he said to him, I swear by the Lord that you have been a trustworthy ally. I think you should go into battle with me. I've never found a single flaw in you from the day you arrived until today. But the other guys, the Philistine rulers, they won't hear of it. They don't want this. And you can kind of hear in Achish, he has a complete trust in David. And you kind of hear almost this embarrassment, this shame that he has to come and tell David, like, hey, man, the other guys don't trust you. They don't want you in battle. I know that you're good, but I'm sorry. And for whatever reason, Achish doesn't really do much more to stand up for kind of what he thinks. He just kind of lets it go. And he tells David, hey, David, I don't want to be upset with me, but just go home quietly. Achish, didn't want to make waves, or at least any more waves than he had. And so he sends David home. But the interesting thing here is, as we look at this, I think ultimately God was using this in David's life to protect him, to save him from having to go and fight against his own brothers and sisters, his fellow Israelites. I mean, remember, this is David who is so honorable in his actions that he wouldn't even take Saul when opportunity after opportunity came for him to take his life. It's the same David, and now he's marching out. He's on this path to march out with the Philistines against Israelites. And it's a good lesson for us because I think there are times in life that things aren't going the way that we want it to go, and we have to at least leave room to understand that maybe God is directing our steps. Now, it's really important in those moments to recognize and to first reflect, okay, is there any sin in my life? Am I really going down the right path? Am I truly following after God? Am I spending time in prayer? Am I listening to the voice of God? Am I in his word so that I get direction? I mean, it's really important to make sure that we're lined up right, because it's real easy to be led off course by our feelings, our emotions, by what is happening around us. But the reality is, you got to make sure that you're in the right place with God. And when that happens and you find yourselves in these situations, you have to at least leave room. Possibly God is directing your steps and saving you from something else, which is exactly what's happening here in the life of David. In those moments when things don't go as planned, you got to find your place and your hope and your strength in God. What have I done to deserve this treatment? David demanded. What have you ever found in your servant that I can't go and fight the enemies of my Lord, the king? David seems genuinely disappointed that he is being sent back home. But Achish insisted, as far as I'm concerned, David, you're as perfect as an angel of God. But the Philistine commanders, which we all know the backstory because David's actually been doing these kind of alternate raids on the weekends, and Achish is like, oh, he's like perfect. Now get up early in the morning and leave with your men as soon as it gets light. And again, this may have been part of God's plan all along. God's making a way for David to not have to fight against his brothers and sisters. God's, in essence, preserving his character even through this. So David and his men headed back to the land of the Philistines while the Philistine army went on to Jezreel. And here, the story kind of diverges into two paths. There's of what happens to David and his men as they go home and what happens to the Philistine army. Well, we're going to find out about the Philistine army in the next chapter, but in this next chapter here, what we're getting ready to dive into, chapter 30, we're going to find out what happens to David when he gets sent home from this battle that he thought he was going to be able to fight with the Philistines. It says 3 days later, when David and his men arrived home at their town of Ziklag, they found that the Amalekites who had made a raid into the Negev and Ziklag. They had crushed Ziklag and burned it to the ground, and they had carried off the women and children and everyone else, but without killing anyone. So David and his men, they get back from the battlefield. Of course, they already have this feeling of being rejected because the Philistines are like, yep, we don't want you to go out to fight with us. We know you've been loyal. We know you've been doing the right, but we don't want you to go out. So they just get kicked off the Philistine team because they couldn't be trusted. They come home. They find their homes burned, their wives and their children taken. I mean, this would have been a devastating day for David and his men. A devastating moment. Well, when David and his men saw the ruins and realized what had happened to their families, they wept until they couldn't weep anymore. You know, there are seasons in this life when we look around our lives and everything seems ruined. Everything seems broken. Everything seems chaotic. We look around and we're like, why is this happening? Why does it all look like a mess? My family's not here. And if we do have family there, it's the family you don't want with you. Y'all know what I'm talking about. The people we love, they're not there. Friends gone. Everything that we seem to enjoy in this life that brought joy and pleasure, it's vanished, taken. And we find ourselves in this place and we've cried all the tears that we can cry. Many of us can remember a moment like this that we traveled through in our own lives. I can remember a time like that for me when the pain and the loss and the loneliness is so great that you find yourself in this place really of losing your hope. And maybe today some of you are going through that season right now. A season when you've cried until there's literally no more tears to cry. And we ask ourselves, why, God? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? And it's easy to get lost in these moments, but I want us to look at David. David's two wives, verse 5, Ahinoam from Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal from Carmel, were among those captured. David was now in great danger because all his men were very bitter about losing their sons and daughters, and they began to talk of stoning him. When the enemy came into the lives of David and his men and they destroyed everything that they had, the next thing that he did was to cause them to turn on each other and to start fighting amongst themselves. See, the enemy will come into our lives. He will steal the things that we value, and then he will tempt us to start looking for somebody else to blame. Somebody to blame for the problems, somebody to blame for the problems in my life, somebody to blame for why I'm feeling this way, and somebody to blame for why things aren't going the way that it's supposed to go, the way that I had planned. And so things go from bad to worse for David. So how does David deal with all of this? He says this, but David found strength in the Lord his God. David found strength in the Lord his God. A powerful phrase. David didn't get his strength from his stuff. That was already stolen. He didn't go and find his strength in his family. They had already been taken. He didn't go find his strength in the people that he did life with in his community and his friends. They were ready to stone him and to kill him. They were mad. The verse says that David found strength in the Lord his God. He strengthened himself in God. Listen, if you get nothing else out of this chapter, get this, that in the middle of the chaos and of the troubles and the struggles and the challenges and the disappointments and the fear and the anxiety and in the middle of the depression, in the middle of all of that mess that happens in life, you have to figure out in those moments, what are you going to do? Are you going to just go by cruise control and give into the gossip and the anger and the depression and the anxiety and the eating your way out of the problem or stressing your way out of that problem? Or are you going to dig deep and find your strength in the Lord? David dug deep and he intentionally found his strength in the Lord. Then he said to Abiathar the priest, bring me the ephod. Again, that was the vest that the priest would use when he was going and ministering before the Lord. And so Abiathar brought it. And David asked the Lord, should I chase after this band of raiders? Will I catch them? And the Lord told him, yes, go after them. You will surely recover everything that was taken from you. Again, this is really important for us to see. David goes to God for encouragement. David goes to God for strength. He goes to God for direction. This is a complete contrast to what we saw just a few chapters ago in the life of Saul. Remember, Saul has the armies of Philistine coming against him. And what does he do? He's desperate. And what does he do? He goes and finds a witch to give him instruction. That's where Saul goes. And here we see David. David goes to God. God, and he's like, I need direction from you. I'm not going to go talk to my friends. I'm not going to go try to figure this out on my own. I'm not going to get some counselor in here. I'm going to go to you straight, God, and I'm going to get my answer from you. David encouraged himself in the Lord. He found his strength in the Lord. And David digs deep and he goes to God. He gets his strength from the Lord and he gets direction from God. And God says, go get him. I'm going to be with you. And so David and his 600 men set out. And they came to the brook Besor, but 200 of the men were too exhausted to cross the brook. And so David continued the pursuit with 400 men. Along the way, they found an Egyptian man in a field and brought him to David. And they gave him some bread to eat and water to drink. They also gave him part of a fig cake and 2 clusters of raisins, for he hadn't had anything to eat or drink for 3 days and nights. Before long, his strength returned. So David and his men, they take off against trying to find the Amalekites. And about a third of the guys, 200 guys, they are just mentally and physically and emotionally exhausted from all the events that have happened. And so they're like, we can't go on. We're tapping out. And so the other 400 guys, they keep on going, they keep on pursuing, and they come across this guy who's, I'll say he's like dehydrated, he's got low blood sugar, he's half dead, and they're like, okay, let's get some nutrients in this guy. Let's get him some Gatorade, let's get him some liquid IV, let's get him something to eat. And the second part of this verse really cracks me up because they give him some bread to eat and water to drink. And then there's this, they also gave him part of a fig cake and 2 clusters of raisins. I can kind of just see one of the guys is like reaching this. He's like, oh, I got half of this fig cake. He can have a bite of this. And I had some fresh grapes, but now they're raisins. He can eat these. And they're like feeding him to get him kind of up to energy so we can kind of find out what's the story. And so, David goes, to whom do you belong and where do you come from? He goes, I'm an Egyptian, the slave of an Amalekite. Well, at this point, everybody's kind of listening because now all ears are on this. Wait a second. He's with the Amalekites? He goes, my master abandoned me 3 days ago because I was sick. We were on our way back from raiding the Kirithites in the Negev, the territory of Judah and the land of Caleb. We had just burned Ziklag. Now, if you're in the group of army and the people, these are not just the people that are with David, they're not like gentlemen. They're kind of like the rough guys. Remember, they were the outlaws, the people that were just kind of rejected by society. And so all of a sudden they're like, wait, this guy's like, oh yeah, I was with the guys that we just burned Ziklag. They're like, wait, what? They're getting ready to come on. I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? This guy's partly responsible for it? And David says, will you lead me to this band of raiders? The young man replied, you can kind of see him thinking. He's like, well, if you take an oath in God's name, and he uses not the name Yahweh, but Elohim. He's like, if you take an oath in the name of the God over all, that you'll not kill me or give me back to my master, then I'll guide you to them. Right? He's like, listen, if I tell you where they are and then you turn me back over to them, I'm done. Or if you kill me on the way, I'm done. He's like, you got to promise to me by the God over all this stuff that you're going to not do that. And so he led David to them, and they found the Amalekites spread out across the field, eating and drinking and dancing with joy because of the vast amount of plunder they had taken from the Philistines and the land of Judah. So this Egyptian guy leads them straight to the Amalekite camp, and they find them partying and celebrating and getting hammered, and they're just rejoicing because they're like, woohoo, we got all this stuff, we beat them, and now we're back home here. And David and his men rushed in among them and slaughtered them throughout that night and the entire next day until evening. None of the Amalekites escaped except 400 young men who fled on camels. They fought for almost 24 hours straight. David got back everything the Amalekites had taken. He rescued his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, small or great, son or daughter, nor anything else that had been taken. David brought everything back. God allowed David and his men to recover all that the enemy had stolen. He had also recovered all the flocks and herds, and his men drove them ahead of their other livestock. This plunder belongs to David, they said. They basically get all their things back, but the extra stuff that they got from the Amalekites, because the Amalekites had raided more than just Ziklag, they got all that stuff, and they're marching all of that stuff in front of kind of the armies, and they're like, hey, this is David's stuff. This is his share, and they're kind of treating him like they would treat a king. They're honoring him. And then David returned to the brook Besor and met up with the 200 men who had been left behind because they were too exhausted to go with him. They went out to meet David and his men, and David greeted them joyfully. But some evil troublemakers among David's men said, they didn't go with us. They can't have the plunder that we recovered. Give them their wives and their children and tell them to be gone. Like we're done with them. They quit on us. But David said, no, my brothers, don't be selfish with what the Lord has given us. He has kept us safe and helped us defeat the band of raiders that attacked us. See, David recognized that it was the Lord who had given them victory. It was the Lord who had helped them recover this stuff. It was God who had brought this stuff back. And David wasn't about to say, oh, listen, hey, God gave us this. And because God gave us this, I'm not letting you have it because you didn't go out with us. David wasn't going to do that. He was saying, listen, God gave us this, brothers. We got to share this. He's the one who's kept us safe. He's the one who's helped us to defeat the band of raiders that attacked us. Who will listen to you when you talk like this, guys? We share and we share alike, those who go to battle and those who guard the equipment. And from that day on, David made a decree and a regulation for Israel, and is still followed today. When he arrived at Ziklag, David sent part of the plunder to the elders of Judah who were his friends. Here's a present for you taken from the Lord's enemies, he said. The gifts were sent to the people of the following towns David had visited: Bethel, Ramoth Negev, Jadar, Arior, Sifmoth, Estemoa, Rakel, and the towns of Jerahmeelites, the towns of the Kenites, Hormah, Borishin, Athik, Hebron, and all the other places David and his men had visited. What seemed to start as David going down this path where he was going to end up causing destruction to the Israelites, to his brothers and sisters, because he was joining the fight with the Philistines. What started out as David on this path of really going to harm and curse Israel turned out into something where David blessed Israel. David took the plunder from the Amalekites and he used some of it as a gift to his brothers and sisters. He also returned to those that had stuff stolen from them, from the Amalekites. Even though David didn't have a home in Israel, even though Saul was hunting him down like a convict, David continued to serve God and serve Israel in a manner that was befitting a king. Years later, David's son Solomon will write this in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5. He says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not depend on your own understanding." Don't worry about what you see around. Don't just try to depend on your own strategy, your own abilities, and your own strength. Don't just look at what you see on the horizon and be like, okay, I know I can handle that. Don't depend on your own understanding, on your own strength. Seek his will in all that you do, and he will show you which path to take. Bethel, just like David, just like Solomon's writing about, when life doesn't go the way that we planned, we have to be people who dig deep and find our strength in God. Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you, Lord, that you guide us, you direct us, and you lead us. And Father, I pray that as your children, we would be people who stay devoted to you, who in the middle of chaos and difficulty and challenges, that we dig deep and we intentionally decide to follow after you, to trust in you. And Father, we ask that we would be people that aren't distracted by the things that we see, by our own abilities or our own inabilities, but instead we trust in you as the God who is the God over all, the God whose name is Emmanuel, the God with us, and we trust in you. So Lord, I pray this over us, that that's the kind of people that we would be, your children who trust in the name of the Lord. And it's in Jesus' name we pray, and all God's people said, amen. You know, in the Old Testament, before the time of the kings, it was the time of the judges. And in the time of the judges, these judges would rule and lead the people of Israel. And one of these judges was a guy by the name of Samson. And Samson was a Nazirite, meaning that he wasn't supposed to cut his hair, no haircuts and no alcohol in his life. And he was supposed to live this way as his life. And really kind of the secret of how he honored God and worshiped God and not cutting his hair was how God really used that as kind of almost like the touch point to which gave him his strength. But Samson had a weakness, and it was beautiful women who didn't follow after God. Now, if you're in that dating season of life and you are seeking after just some beautiful person that doesn't follow after God, you should learn from Samson's life what not to do. Because Samson keeps chasing after these women and he eventually ends up in the lap of Delilah, flirting with her and flirting with disaster, really, as he starts to reveal to her the strength, the secret of his strength. Samson just disrespected this thing that God had done for him by sharing this sacred secret. And this is what we read in Judges chapter 16, verse 17. Finally, Samson shared his secret with her. My hair has never been cut, he confessed, for I was dedicated to God as a Nazirite from my birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me and I would become as weak as anyone else. Delilah realized he had finally told her the truth. So she sent for the Philistine rulers. Come back one more time, she said, for he has told me his secret. And so the Philistine rulers returned with money in their hands, and Delilah lulled Samson to sleep with his head in her lap, and she called a man to shave off the 7 locks of his hair. And in this way she began to bring him down, and his strength left him. And she cried out, Samson, the Philistines have come to capture you. And when he woke up, he thought, man, I'm going to do just as I've done before. I'll shake myself free. But he didn't realize that the Lord had left him. So the Philistines captured him and gouged out his eyes. They took him to Gaza, where he was bound with bronze chains, forced to grind grain in the prison. In this particular moment in Samson's life, it would have looked like it's all over. His parents would have been so distraught that they had watched Samson make bad decision after bad decision. And finally it gets to this place where his hair is shaved off. He's bound up in chains. He's been blinded. He's been reduced to nothing. This man that was supposed to be the leader and the judge over Israel, reduced to nothing because of his sin. And it says the Spirit of the Lord left him. But what we read in the verses that come next is that the hair on his head began to grow. And a few verses later, we read Samson in his final act. Broken, blind, bald, in chains, having screwed up royally. The Spirit of God had left him, it says. And in this moment, Samson, he was somebody who knew grace. He knew God even though he didn't do the right thing. He knew God because in that moment he called out to God and said, God, if you'll just do this one more thing for me. And God answered his prayer, and the Spirit of God through him allowed Samson to bring more judgment on the Philistines than in his entire life combined in that one moment. Samson dug deep and found his strength, not in his performance, not in his ability, not in what he had done, but he found his strength in the Lord. Bethel, that's the calling for you and me. You know that football game I was telling you about? Mater Dei versus Memorial? It was almost the end of that game with 1:20 left. Mater Dei is ahead, 21-7. It's hopeless. Fans are leaving. Team looks distraught. Fans lost hope. And I know it's only a game, but I prayed and I found out later that Faith did, and I found out this morning that my kid did. It's the end of the fourth quarter, 1:06 left, and Memorial makes a touchdown, making the score 21-14. Now, that doesn't get a win and it doesn't change much. There's about a minute left. There's less than a minute left. Mater Dei's got the ball. It's over, but at least they can hang their heads high that they tried and pushed through to the end. But then a perfect execution of an onside kick. Memorial regains the ball, scores a touchdown. Okay, thanks, Bill. They go into overtime, and Memorial wins. My kid had a great part in the play of holding it back. But Bethel, there are many times in this life when you're going to feel like it's over, like it's finished. Like there's nothing left to do, that there's way too far gone. There's not enough resources. I don't have enough money to solve this. There's not enough time. There's not enough people. It's over. It's chaos. It's the fray. I got no hope. There's nothing. And I'm learning to accept the difficulty and the challenge that there's nothing that I can do. You may feel like it's over, and you may be already preparing yourselves for going down for the final count. But listen, it may feel like your friends have left you. It may feel like there's no resources, there's no bread in the cupboard. It may feel like there's no family around. And from what you can see, there is no realistic way to get out of this. This is it. You're at the final. Listen, Bethel, it is in those moments that the people of God, they don't look at what's in their hands. They look deep in their heart and they find their strength and their hope in God. Bethel, that's the challenge for us. You're all gonna face difficulty. You're all gonna face challenges. We're all gonna face persecution. It's going to happen. Jesus told us it would. But in those moments, don't you give up. Don't you lose hope. Don't you get so frantic that you get stressed and anxious and lost in the moment. But instead, you dig deep. You dig deep and you find your strength and your hope in the name of the Lord, your God, in Christ alone. Bethel, remember that this week as you go. Have a great week. God bless you.